guest. He's the our guest of honor, keynote speaker from WHO, Dr. Craig.
So nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm really honored. That's really nice.
Where are you placed right now?
In Geneva.
Geneva.
Okay. Yeah. So at the moment we have, sometimes we're in the office and sometimes we work from home. This morning I'm at home and then this afternoon I'll be in the office.
Wherever we are, we don't know.
Yeah. That's right. So it will take some more time. Yeah. How is it in Delhi?
Delhi is good. I'm in Hyderabad.
Ah, you're in Hyderabad.
I'm in Hyderabad. Sikriji in
Delhi.
Delhi.
Yeah.
We're getting better. We are doing much better with COVID right now.
Right.
As a country, we are doing much better.
Very well. And I think in terms of vaccination, you also
It started.
It started. Yeah.
We have 2 vaccines available. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I've lived in Bangalore for a while, for a couple of years.
Okay.
So and then I'd been to Delhi many times before, advising the commission. Yeah, so I know India a bit.
Dr. Ramaya?
Yes. Got another few more minutes, then we will start.
Sure. Now,
yes.
Dr. Ramaya, now I'm going to make you the host. Okay?
Okay.
Now you are the co-host. I'm going to make you the host. Right?
Yes.
Then you make me the co-host in case if I had to do something. Okay?
How do you do that? Tell me.
You see, go to my name.
Yeah.
And press it on that. It says mute or more. Press more.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah, more. Stop.
Now, see, now you are the host.
Yeah.
Now you are the host. Go to my name now. Go to my name, Sam Patipandla.
Yeah, and then I can make.
Press more and make me the co-host.
Okay.
And make all the speakers co-hosts.
Yeah.
No, I'm not co-host yet.
Okay.
Make me.
Yes, 1 minute. Okay.
Go to participants. Go to participants and press on my name.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I'm the co-host. Like that you do. You can make all the speakers co-hosts. So they can share the screen and yeah.
तो इस जन दिखा रहा था मैंने जैसे ऑन किया मेरा बंद क्यों गया स्टार्ट वीडियो पर मेरे पीछे सब वो चल गया ना कंबल ये सब दिख रहा है ये कंबल दिख रहा है ना
Anil is there?
Okay. What do you want? Tell me.
No, in case you need it, you can get in there.
Anil is in another meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He works for IBM.
Okay.
Ramya, once you try muting everyone and unmuting the speaker. Try that.
Okay.
You mute all of us.
Mute all.
And Okay. Ramya, do one thing, mute all and say and put allow participants to unmute. So speaker can unmute himself or herself.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to see.
Okay.
Ask unmute. More stop video.
So we can now unmute ourselves. That's good. Yeah.
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 That's what I'm trying to see.
No, Ramaya, you go to participants.
Yes.
In the bottom, it says invite mute all.
Yes.
Then you see the 3 dots there.
Yes.
Press on the 3 dots.
Yes.
You have all the options.
Ask all to unmute.
No, you can mute everyone, then allow participants to unmute themselves.
I got it.
Yeah.
Now they can do that.
Okay.
I think good morning, Levin. You can unmute yourself.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Ramaya, I'm S. Aparna, the Secretary on the Department of Pharmaceuticals, joining you here.
Thank you, madam.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ramaya, you can make Doctor also co-host.
Yes.
So you can do it that time also. Either way.
I think I'll do it now.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Sikri here. We are Sikri.
Good afternoon, sir.
It was very nice of you, Madam Begla, to come to this conference, to this webinar. We appreciate it. I think we'll start in 2 minutes maximum.
We should go ahead. It's already
8 minutes late. I think if everybody is okay, I'll start.
Yeah, please start.
It's already late, and thank you for being patient while we are learning this one. First of all, greetings. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Ramaya Mutiala, President and CEO of Indian Organization for Rare Diseases. I will make few introductory remarks about today's webinar. First of all, welcome Dr. Rigor Craig, Mrs. Aparna, Mr. Bhavan, Dr. Agrawal, Dr. Benham, Dr. Ramappa, Mr. Sikri, and attendees mostly from India. There are speakers from outside and also some participants from outside the country. Now, philosophically speaking, life can be unfair and unjust, but it is not unchangeable if you determine to change it. 16 years ago, we knew things were not right for rare disease patients in India, but we dreamed that it could be better after my generation, if not in my generation. Nevertheless, here we are. Beyond doubt, today's webinar is one of the momentous events in our history, as you can see from the participants and speakers list. Further, this event fondly reminds us the enthusiasm generated at the first international conference in 2015 on raising the awareness of rare diseases, where former President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, delivered the inaugural address. Now, you perhaps heard this, what Albert Einstein's quote said, intellectuals solve problems, genius prevent them. Very relevant quote for today's topic, that is prevention. Its significance is assumed as India's estimated rare disease population is about 90 million. For the last 16 years, IORD, that's our organization, is partnering with the government, patient organizations, healthcare providers, and other stakeholders striving for advocacy measures to press for equal rights to rare disease patients. I repeat, equal rights to rare disease patients on par with what is available to the people suffering from common ailments. In this context, we ask what changes could be made in systems, policies, and processes to better protect, maintain, and improve rare disease patients' health. You all agree with me that health disparities persist and are neither random nor unpredictable. We have seen the rare disease patients have experienced the most significant inequities in the social and economic conditions in every country, particularly in India. Let me bring a known fact to your attention, that is, health and economy were closely intertwined in every society. Orphan drugs are so expensive that countries such as India, with healthcare budget of 1.75% GDP for 1.3 billion people, cannot afford to provide healthcare service adequately to all patients, rare or common diseases. It would be wise for both the governments and individuals to consider that health is an investment rather than expense. It is gratifying to note just yesterday, the Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced that the Indian health budget is doubled. Maybe she knew that we might ask some of it. Most discoveries of orphan drugs occur outside India. According to NIH NCAT's director, Dr. Christopher Austin, getting therapies for all 7,000 rare diseases takes several centuries. We cannot afford to wait any longer, and particularly that long. New technologies such as CRISPR-R, gene, stem cell therapy, etc., are pursued successfully in several countries, including India. Although promising, they would take long time while these technologies are made available and affordable to the masses. Today, many rare disease patients have difficulty finding doctors to treat their condition. They are suffering. Meanwhile, we do what we have to so that we can do what we want to do. We argue that a parallel effort should be made to address long-term solutions for the present-day problem. A creative solution is prevention of rare diseases. We understand it is a slow process, but ideal for any country, and particularly to the less resourceful countries. One might pessimistically claim that rare diseases are genetic, therefore they cannot be preventable. However, over 3,000 conditions are monogenic disorders. Geneticists tell me they are preventable. all may not be at one time, but one at a time is possible. First, the prevention programs, we propose to select a few diseases based on the available knowledge or with the advice of disease experts. In Gujarat, India, a significant progress is made in preventing sickle cell disease by the program initiated by Prime Minister Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. This type of programs could serve as a model in other countries and for other diseases as well. For example, to the lysosomal storage disorder such as Pompe or Gaucher disease, neurological disease such as SMA or SMD, and blood disorder, hemophilia, metabolic disorder, Wilson disease, and so on and so forth. Second, in the government's health mission, prevention programs such as finding families with a genetic disorder, early counseling, incentivizing the preventive methods should become a priority. Then the challenge is to recognize rare disease prevention programs from other public health programs. It is now doable as the union budget for this year focus on 3 areas: prevention, curative, and well-being. For the first time, the term prevention is mentioned in the union budget. This is very encouraging. Third, every country suffers from rare diseases, rich or poor. With no exception, rare diseases are global. No one country can do it alone. Human migration is unavoidable. Disease propagation occurs with human to human. There must be a unified effort by all nations to address the problem. History proved time and time that prevention, reduction, and sometimes eradication is possible with global collaboration and cooperation. Now, a much broadly speaking, I bring to your attention another vital concept, namely One Health. It is an approach to designing and implementing programs, policies, legislation, and research to achieve better public health outcomes. It is a collaborative, multi-sectorial, and transdisciplinary approach working at all levels, regional, national, and global levels, recognizing the interconnections between the people, animals, plants, and their shared environment. Please make a note, the health matters for all individuals, societies, and to the global economy. Now, India has the obligation not only to herself, but also to the world. India, a signatory member of United Nations, has agreed to work towards universal health coverage by 2030 as part of Sustainable Development Goals. Universal health coverage is a political choice. Without the inclusion of rare diseases, universal health coverage is incomplete. Let me repeat, universal health coverage is incomplete without the inclusion of rare diseases. Now, let me emphasize, universal health coverage includes the full range of health services that include access to essential medicines, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and host of other issues. We are already addressing some of these issues. Last August, with the support of Drug Control General of India and 5 major Indian pharma organizations, together we highlighted the importance of having a national list of essential medicines for rare disease. Further, orphan drugs are included in the production-linked incentives granted to the pharma industry by Indian government to counter the import restrictions due to COVID pandemic and to boost exports. Now it is the time to create and execute prevention strategies for rare diseases. Individual investments in self-care and preventive health lower the spending on curative care. Every stakeholder, government, industry, academia, research, patients, etc., has a role in it. Now, if we agree prevention is better than cure, a saying, a stitch in time saves the 9 applies. The time is running out. It must begin sometime. I ask, why not now? It is hoped that today's webinar would bring out the strategies, opportunities, and global collaboration in preventing or slowing down the spread of rare diseases. Look at what COVID-19 pandemic did for global collaborations in just 1 year. We should not wait for another pandemic to solve an age-old common problem that affects more than 300 million people worldwide suffering from India. That's the message I want to share with you. With this brief introduction, let me request Mr. B.R. Sikri, Chairman, FOPI, Vice President, BDMI, and Executive Member of our organization, IO already board member, introduce Mrs. Aparna, Secretary, Department of Pharmaceuticals, to deliver the inaugural address. Mr. Sikri, floor is yours.
Thank you.
One last housekeeping thing. There are several questions have been forwarded to us before even the webinar started. Most likely, some of them may be answered by the speakers. If not, we will try to address after the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ramaiah. I hope you are able to listen me.
Yes.
Honorable Madam S. Aparna, Secretary, Department of Pharma, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. Respected speakers from WHO, Health Department, Australia, speaker from Belgium, Hyderabad, and CSIR. My dear close friend and elderly personality, Professor Ramaiah. Dr. Anurag Agarwal, Director from CSIR. It is indeed an honor, ma'am, for me to introduce a very humble personality in the form of Madam Aparna, who has put positive impression not only on me, rather on IORD as well as on the entire pharma industry as a whole. Because way back, 5-6 years ago, with great difficulty, madam, we could see the word rare disease and orphan drug in the health policy, which was announced by the former health minister, Mr. J.P. Nadda. Before that, IORD as well as many other organizations have been raising this issue, but unfortunately, nobody listened our version. Finally, we were lucky to see the word orphan drug or rare disease in health policy, which was announced by Mr. J.P. Nadda. Secondly, madam, it is during your tenure, only a few months back you have joined. And surprisingly, everybody in IORD, particularly Professor Ramaiah, was really surprised that we have been raising this voice in the overall interest of the patient of the rare disease. And madam, after taking over as the Secretary of Department of Pharma, coming with PLI 2 scheme, orphan drug name is appearing. That itself shows the seriousness on the part of you as well as on the part of the government. So this is a very great contribution which we have given to the nation and to the rare disease patient. Madam, although it is in the incentive scheme, but still I would like to add one more point here before I give formal introduction about you, that in case industry is not still able to come forward with the development of orphan drug because of the less incentive, it is not a very big deal. You may have to reconsider the incentive scheme for orphan drug in a different manner, because it involves a lot of research and innovation, whereas number of patients are less. So to have the commercial viability, industry may seek some more support, some more blessing from you. Now coming back to the introduction, yesterday Finance Minister made this budget announcement from 93,000 crore to 2.23, which is 137%. So great support to the industry, great support to the nation. But now we have to see, where does orphan drug lies? I come to the main duty for which Professor Ramaiah has deputed me to introduce Madam Aparna. Although I should have introduced her first, then I should have kept my version. But being a selfish, I have done it other way around. Madam is a very humble, a humane and dynamic personality. Her name is Madam S. Aparna, who was born in Tamil Nadu, worked in Gujarat, traveled overseas many countries, who was a student of zoology, received master's degree in the same subject, and did her MPhil in energy and environment. Surprisingly, she is a business management student with international finance. She has served various important positions, not only at state level of rather at central level and overseas. In addition, she was executive director in World Bank during 2017, representing the constituencies of India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. She also happened to work as a principal secretary to the Chief Minister of Gujarat. At the end, I will say 2 lines in Urdu, ma'am, but since there are foreign dignitaries participating, so I'll be doing the translation also. These 2 lines are dedicated to Madam Aparna only. उर्दू में बोला है कि तुझको खुदा कहूं या खुदा को खुदा कहूं, दोनों की सूरत एक है, किसको खुदा कहूं. English version is, do I call you God or do I call God as God? Both of you look alike. To whom do I call God? With these remarks, I request God will bless you. Please keep on serving the nation as a patriotic citizen the way you are already doing it. Pharma industry and IURD has high hope from you, madam. The way you are conducting your duties with transparency, it is a role model for many other bureaucrats in our country. Your heart throbs and beats for the Rashtra Bhakti. Salute to your sincerity and dedication, Madam Aparna. Thank you. Over to Professor Ramaiah.
Thank you very much. Now, if the madam will take and then give the her presentation.
You have to unmute, madam. You have to unmute, please.
Ramaiah, please.
Unmute all, yes.
You have to unmute, ma'am.
Now each one can unmute individuals. Madam, yeah, it is done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Ramaiah Muthlia, and also to Shri Sikri Saib for his introductory remarks. For me, it is a pleasure to be with the Indian Organization for Rare Diseases today because it is an opportunity for learning. As you know, and as the name itself suggests, these are rare diseases which are not well understood, they're not popular, not well addressed. And seminars and organizations like yours are doing a human service to ensure that the voice of the unheard can be heard by practitioners, policymakers, and the industry. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your efforts, your initiatives, and the service that you are doing. As I mentioned, and as Dr. Sikri also mentioned, I am new to this sector, but it has been 4 months and I have learned a lot in the 4 months. I would like to share my expectations and my views on this. As all of you are aware, the policy, the national policy for rare diseases lies in the domain of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And they have toiled on this, tried to evoke views and comments from various stakeholders. And a policy is now in the public domain since January last year. And I am sure that very soon the ministry will be in a position to finalize the policy. However, as has been pointed out by Shri Sikri Saib also, it is not that the government is waiting for the policy to be finalized to take action that may be necessary. Of course, globally, there are 6,000 to 8,000 rare diseases, and maybe 350 of them account for almost 80% of the patients. So those patients that happen to have a disease which is not in those 350 diseases, which account for the majority, are in fact even more disadvantaged because of the size of the population in which they fall, and therefore possibly the attention that these patients and the diseases that they are afflicted with get would be minuscule. In India, of course, maybe about 450 rare diseases have been recorded. And the most common one, as all of you know, are thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, lysosomal storage disorders, etc. You mentioned in your opening remarks, Professor Ramaiah, that Gujarat has done considerable work in reducing the incidence of sickle cell anemia. I myself have worked in those regions, which is South Gujarat, where there is a large population of indigenous or tribal people. And a huge campaign was undertaken by government, not only for providing therapeutic facilities, but also for bringing about behavioral change. And it had become commonplace for marriages to be finalized, the alliances to be finalized only after genetic tests were done, blood tests were done, among the population which had a high incidence of sickle cell anemia. So government adopted not only therapeutic, but also preventive measures to ensure that the population which was having a propensity for sickle cell anemia could be protected and the disease could be prevented, and hopefully over a period of time, it would die out. This is a very good example where when therapy is not available, or it is very costly, or it can only alleviate suffering and not cure the disease, then behavioral and societal support and changes also are important in ensuring that genetic defects or genetic diseases are not transmitted and are not prevalent.
అమ్మాయి గారు మేడం మెయిన్ స్క్రీన్ లో పెట్టగలరా రామయ్య గారు?
Yes.
So if I may continue, there are inherent problems in addressing the problem of rare diseases, inherent challenges. One, of course, is that very little is known about the pathophysiology or the natural history of many of these diseases, because it is difficult to conduct research because the patient pool is very small, there is inadequate clinical experience. Access to medicine also becomes a challenge because often there is no effective or safe treatment available. And even when the correct diagnosis is made, which itself is sometimes difficult, it is not possible that the therapy may be available, because although there are close to 8,000 rare diseases, less than 300 have therapies which are readily available to treat them. So the patients face a double challenge in terms of diagnosis as well as therapy. And in that context, the theme for today's seminar, and we have experts from all over the world in this webinar, the theme of preventing such rare diseases becomes much more important. I would like to quickly point out the Indian regulatory as well as developmental efforts. All of you would know that the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940, it governs the regulation of drugs that are brought into manufacturing and marketing. And the new Drug and Clinical Trials Rules 2019, they have made specific provisions for orphan drugs. They have been defined as drug intended to treat a condition which affects fewer than 5 lakh, that is 500,000 persons in India. The orphan drug designation qualifies the sponsor of the drug for exemption from fees chargeable in respect of application for conduct of clinical trials, etc., because since it is already challenging financially to go into manufacture of orphan drugs, there are also special situations for new drugs for relaxation, omissions, deferment, etc., for those diseases for those drugs which are used in rare diseases. It is also permitted under these new rules that a medical officer of a government hospital or a government medical institution can import a new drug, including an orphan drug, which has not yet been permitted in the country under rules, but is approved for marketing in the country of origin for treatment of a patient suffering from the threatening disease or disease causing serious permanent disability or disease requiring therapies for unmet medical needs. This ensures that even if the size of the patient population is very small, government doctors, when they have diagnosed such a situation, will be able to even import drugs. So this is an additional facility in terms of access to orphan drugs for the rare diseases. There is also provision under the Drugs and Price Control Amendment Order in 2019, where the provisions of the order are not applicable in cases of drugs for treating rare diseases or orphan drugs, as decided by the ministry. This enables innovative treatment drugs to be brought into the country without without being subject to onerous regulations, and that makes innovative treatments available to this very small patient population. In addition, as a measure to encourage the industry to work on in terms of research and development and also to manufacture orphan drugs, the recently announced production-linked incentive scheme, that is a scheme for providing incentive on the incremental sales of certain drugs, has included orphan drugs in its list, in its category A, of those pharmaceuticals which will be eligible for incentive over a period of 5 to 6 years. This is to encourage manufacturers to venture into the production of orphan drugs which are not perhaps financially very viable because of the very small volumes that are required for meeting the market. Therefore, I am hopeful that all these efforts, both in terms of the regulatory space, the regulatory exemptions, the price control exemptions, as well as the incentive to manufacturers, will encourage greater production of drugs required for the treatment of rare diseases, orphan drugs. It will encourage more innovation. It will also encourage more collaboration between Indian manufacturers and scientists, as well as R&D establishments located outside in the Western world, to ensure that these drugs become available in India. However, I do believe that the ultimate or the larger objective should be to ensure that drugs required by every patient in the country is not only accessible but also affordable. And our department will continue to support organizations such as yourselves to ensure that patient pool, a population of very small number of patients, should not get neglected and their needs should also be met. I would bring it to the notice of this August gathering that in India, it is not only the Department of Pharmaceuticals, but also other departments that can be helpful to your organization in bringing more attention to the issue of providing access and affordability to orphan drugs or drugs for rare diseases. And these include the Department for Promotion of Industry, that is DPIIT, the Indian Council for Medical Research, the Department of Revenue, which provides incentives and tax credits, as well as the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which can work with you as well as with other professional bodies for identifying and creating a database of rare diseases that require accelerated and focused attention. I hope that today's webinar will be useful in taking this noble cause forward. As has been mentioned by Professor Muthaiya, already the government in the budget for 21-22, fiscal year 21-22, has announced an increase in the funds and the resources available for the healthcare sector. Throughout the world, I believe governments as well as organizations are now keenly aware of the need to devote attention to healthcare, not just as a health problem, but also as a social and economic issue. I do wish this webinar all success, and I will be very happy if the proceedings could be shared with me, which could be useful as policy inputs as we move forward in finalizing our production-linked incentive scheme. So thank you, Professor Ramaiah, for giving me an opportunity. I will try to stay for some of the talks because I mentioned it is a learning experience for me. I perhaps may not be able to stay to the end, but I'll try to stay on as long as possible to hopefully benefit from the speakers that you have lined up. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to see you on the virtual mode.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We really appreciate taking time. And
Ramay garu, speaker has to be on the main screen and me photo vastundi. Can you check with somebody and then get it organized, please?
Yeah, that's what I don't know. I
Yeah.
try to. Sam, can you help me?
We are trying. We are trying. Just put it in the gallery view, sir. Then put it in the gallery view. Yeah. In the meanwhile, we will try that.
Gallery view.
No, participants will do that, Ramaya.
Okay.
Participants will put it in the either gallery view or speaker view.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a
We're
message
good.
that says host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Say that again.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just seeing a message here that says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh,
So,
Dr. Ramaya,
yes.
you have to make Gareth the co-host.
Yeah. I see.
Go to participants.
Yeah.
Name, more.
Ramay garu, can I suggest something?
Yes, please.
If you make Sam as host, he can control it from his side.
Yeah, that better.
Because he happens to be more technologically.
Right.
Yes. Gareth,
yes.
let me introduce you for a minute. Sam, can you mute everybody?
You have to do that. I will.
लेकिन बैठने का प्रोडक्टिव वही रखना है हमने कि let us see कि how the practices are going and to be very true. अब थोड़ा सा मेरे भी कुछ प्लान चल रहे माइंड में जो तुम क्रैश कार्ड वाली बात कर रहे हो ना हो सकता है कि मैं किसी भी दिन जाके रैंडम क्रैश कार्ड खोलूं
मैं जिसको जॉब के बारे में बोलता है मगर मैंने नहीं पता ਤੁਹਾਡੇ क्रैश कार्डां ਦੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਗਾਰੰਟੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਮੈਨੂੰ अपना देखो और अपना फिल करो
Make me the host. Ramaya, make me the host.
जिस दिन मैं गेट कितो कराना है सारे तो पैसे ले कराने चाहिए ये खुले करा के दे हां जी कुछ तक गंदी बड़ा क्रैश कार्ड
Go to my name. More. Participants.
ਹੁਣ ਤੀਜਾ ਔਰਥੋ ਆਈਸੀਯੂ ਵਾਲਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ
Can't do that.
ਹੁਣ ਔਰਥੋ ਆਈਸੀਯੂ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਤੀਜਾ ਚੌਥਾ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਦਾ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ 4 क्रैश कार्ड हो गए ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਿਨ ਖੜੇ ਪੈਰ ਰਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਤਿਆਰ ਕਰਨੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਜੀਸੀਆਈ ਦੇ ਐਨਏਡੀਐਚ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ
Ramaya, make me the host.
Yes.
Go to participants, go to my name, press more.
Okay. Now we are co-host.
No, make me the host. You are the host. Make me the host.
चलो ठीक है
Make me the host. I'll make you the co-host. I'll be the host and you'll be the co-host.
बस कोविड खत्म है समझो बहुत बिल बंदे मरीजां दा
Yeah, I have muted Mr. Kulveer Singh so that Dr. Ramaya, you made Dr. Waghela the host. Now only she can make anyone host.
Okay. I'm not able to do that.
No, Dr. Aparnaji. See if Aparnaji is there. By mistake, you made her the host.
Okay. Yeah.
Only she can make anyone host now.
Okay.
So will you tell me how to make somebody the host? I'll do it.
Okay, madam, please go to participants.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Sam, S-A-M, Sam Pati Bandla.
1 minute. Sam, yes, I got you.
Okay, press on my name.
Uh-huh.
This is more.
Yes.
Press on more.
Uh-huh.
And
Make host.
Host. Yeah.
Are you now the host?
Wonderful. I'm the host.
Okay. Please
Thank
continue.
Thank
I
you.
would also request everybody else to mute. I get a lot of background noise.
Yes.
Which, now I can mute anyone. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, can I take time to introduce
Yes.
Dr. Bainum?
Go ahead.
Sam?
Go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Bainum is currently Director, Department of Health, Western Australia. He is a member of the Western Australian Ministerial Council for Precision Health and is the founder of interwoven initiatives to improve. Some echo is coming from someplace.
I'm going to do that. I'm muting all, then I will unmute you. Ramaya, unmute yourself. Ramaya, please unmute yourself and start speaking.
Yes, yeah. I got it.
Now everyone else is muted. Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. Gareth actually wears several hats. I make it very brief. To mention a few, he's practicing clinical geneticist, genomic policy advisor, clinician scientist, and entrepreneur. He equitably translates innovations for public health through public, private, and multiple stakeholder partnerships. One thing I just make a special introduction for him. I'm very delighted to mention that he is the member of the advisory board of directors for Indian Organization for Rare Diseases. We are very honored to have him. We are grateful for his valuable advice to us on various occasions in the past. Gareth has led the clinical implementation of genomic and phenomic digital health technologies and omics associated policy. He directs the Undiagnosed Diseases Program, Western Australia. Its clinical services and association research. He is the founding member of the International Board of Directors for the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International. He is the chair of the Diagnostic Scientific Committee of the International Rare Disease Research Consortium. And the list goes long, but for now, I let Gareth take over. Gareth, thank you.
Thank you, Ramaya, for that very gracious introduction. It's such an honour to be talking today amongst such esteemed colleagues. I will try to do the audience the justice. I hope you can all see my slides. There should be a slide that says rare disease prevention. A simple nod from somebody will get me excited. Can you, yep, thank you. Right. So I won't go through this in detail because a number of other people have talked about the sheer size of rare diseases and the fact that given the size and the enormous burden associated with rare diseases, this really is a global public health priority. These disorders are severe, often debilitating, lifelong, associated with premature morbidity, premature mortality, and most have a genetic cause. A bit over 2/3 are exclusively childhood and onset. Half of neonatal deaths, at least in countries such as Ireland or other high-income countries, are due to rare diseases. 60% of deaths in Ireland, for instance, for between 1 and 14-year-olds are due to rare diseases. And we'll see as the world continues a demographic transition that for low and middle income countries, that there will be a transition to these similar sorts of disease profiles and burdens. The mental health impact of the uncertainty around rare diseases is enormous. In the United States, up to 50% of pediatric inpatient hospital costs are attributable to genetic and mostly rare diseases. Approximately 5% only at this current time have a specific drug therapy, but there are many things that can be done for any individual living with a rare disease to improve their lives. in the very small population in which I live in Western Australia, which is only a tiny 2.5 million people, and just for children, there are about 63,000 children living with a rare disease. So that fills our largest sporting stadium. Or if we thought about it from an Indian perspective, it would fill many, 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 many sporting stadiums. And that's just with children living with rare diseases. When we think about prevention, I think it's important to take an overall view of prevention and think about the 4 pillars of prevention: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary prevention. And each of these is a massive opportunity to alleviate burden, to innovate, to improve, to save costs, to improve lives in health and social and broader social systems. So primary prevention is really preventing the disease in the first place. And that's often where people's minds go to when the word prevention is mentioned. And it's one important aspect of the suite of approaches to preventing the burden of rare diseases. And we've seen initiatives in the birth defect space, because many birth defects are rare diseases. In fact, birth defects cumulatively are the largest class of rare diseases, certainly in children. And so we see things like folic acid supplementation or food fortification, or other maternal health interventions. And when we think about neural tube defects, for instance, in our own state, we've seen that with adding folate to foods, we've seen a 50% reduction in neural tube defects in young mums, and a 75% reduction in our Australian Aboriginal population. There are also measures like preconception carrier screening, and I think we've heard about efforts in thalassemia as a test bed and a foundation potentially which can be built on to inform reproductive choices. There's secondary prevention. So we can prevent or ameliorate the symptoms of disease with prenatal diagnosis or with newborn screening. There's tertiary prevention, which is reducing or preventing the complications of a disease. And really, early and accurate diagnosis, which is the portal to best medical care, is a critical area for tertiary prevention and for much more. Or for management, because with better disease management, you will reduce the costs and burden of rare diseases. And those health system savings can then be repurposed and used for non-rare disease initiatives, or they could be used for funding therapies or funding registries. Really the diagnostic advances and management efficiencies can drive health systems efficiencies. And it's critical that also talking about the cross-sector things, and it was very heartening to hear the representative from the government of India, from the Department of Pharmaceuticals, talking about the breadth of agencies that potentially could assist in these areas, because really this is a whole of community, not just a whole of health concern and opportunity. And quaternary prevention, which I think is important in the rare disease sector, I guess in particular with the advances in genomic testing technologies. And really it's about first doing no harm. And so in one of those areas we can think about with genomic testing is false positive genomic findings, because those false positive findings then often lead into anxiety, to further investigations, and the opportunity costs therein in a closed funded health system. And so it's critical that efforts are done to prevent those harms, and some of the fundamental things to do that are having accurate and comprehensive genomic reference data for the population in which the genomic test is being performed, because that really does very significantly reduce false positives. And there are also approaches to genetic counselling and how to deploy genomic testing that can also reduce adverse effects and really target your interventions. In terms of preconception carrier screening, certainly in the Australian experience, it's potentially a very powerful tool. But again, it's critical that it is community engaged, that it's community driven, that you're responding to the needs of the community, and that there's genomic and phenotypic, i.e. clinical reference data that allows you to interpret those test results. Because as you advance into preconception carrier screening, you have no phenotype to interpret your gene test results against, because the phenotype is not yet manifested. So there's a real opportunity for population-wide and targeted prevention that really can create very significant opportunities for people, for their families, for the broader community, and for health and further social systems. And the opportunity in India is to address this and to advance the ways that they have, with the very significant new initiatives that are supporting the implementation of rare disease therapy care and innovation, and to avoid the potential for a scattergun approach. Thinking about some things in our own domain that are key learnings, I guess, is the opportunities one has to start from a foundation. So, and to look at what is already existing and how you might partner with those initiatives to build. Again, I come back to the thalassemia screening initiative as one thing that was mentioned, for instance. It's also important when thinking about the different approaches in terms of prevention is to think about how they're different and also how they're the same, and not to unnecessarily conflate, say, for instance, newborn screening and preconception carrier screening. There are some similarities in the principles, but there's also some key differences in how one might best implement those programs. Community engagement and community-driven participation is critical, especially for population-level interventions. Culturally appropriate approaches are also critical, because in the end, this is all about healthcare is about trust, and one wants to prevent the loss of trust. I think another key aspect of prevention is preventing the loss of something you might have or that you've worked very hard to develop, and specifically trust. As an outsider looking in, which is always very dangerous, because you can make a lot of assumptions and get things very, very wrong. And so with those caveats, some things that strike me as particular opportunities for India, not only for Indians living with a rare disease and their families, but also for the global community, because I think there really are a number of areas that India can be global leaders and that can develop solutions that then translate globally. There is clearly the very significant possibility for leapfrogging. That is taking what has been learned from other domains and then starting from a new starting point, and in fact advancing upon those at a faster rate. I'll draw your attention to, for instance, the leapfrogging initiative with the World Economic Forum. I think there are a number of leadership spaces that are, I think, well developed, could be accelerated in India. Again, I say I run the great risk of being an outsider, making grievous errors in interpreting the local dynamic or opportunities, but these are thoughts that have been percolating, and I share them with those caveats. So certainly there are great opportunities with Indian biotechnology, data analytics, information systems, therapeutics. I think particularly about not just new therapies, but also the generics, because there are a number of rare diseases where generics will in fact be an important part of their treatment approach, as well as repurposing. Again, thinking about system-wide, government-backed national initiatives that one could build upon for the rare disease space. I think about the RBSK program, which concentrates on disabilities, birth defects, developmental disorders, and intellectual disability, because so many of those areas completely have a very high level of overlap with rare diseases. We've mentioned that birth defects are a large class of mainly rare diseases, and that they're the single largest class of rare diseases in children. If we drill down to things that are elements of the RBSK program and think about something like hearing loss, well, typically we think that for children, about half of hearing loss has a genetic origin, and each of those are various individual rare genetic diseases. And increasingly, we're seeing that childhood heart disease, in terms of congenital heart disease, has a very significant rare disease genetic cause, and intellectual disability. Similarly, in children, there's a very high burden of genetic and rare diseases as being causative of intellectual disability. This is not a new concept. A number of domains have built upon congenital anomaly, birth defects infrastructure to serve the needs of people living with rare diseases. In Public Health England has created the National Congenital Anomaly and Rare Disease Registration Service, essentially building on the birth defects infrastructure to build a national registry for rare diseases and really a sort of a connected knowledge management web. In a much smaller scale, in my home jurisdiction of Western Australia, we're on a similar journey of building on birth defects infrastructure and bringing together other infrastructures for the synergies between them. It was very exciting to see some newer government initiatives in the rare disease space, because clearly there are both huge needs in rare disease, but also huge opportunities for innovation, huge opportunities for industry, and it was great to see the PLI scheme, including the mention of orphan drugs, complex generics, which again I think are important in the rare disease space, as well as other therapeutic modalities, which are either important for the rare disease space, or in fact the development is driven through the rare disease space. Again, thinking about prevention, well, if you're going to make an intervention for a prevention, you need to be able to evaluate the impact and the outcomes of that prevention, and then use that to inform the future agenda. One of the critical things to doing that is making sure that your health systems can actually track people with rare diseases, can actually cumulatively count people with rare diseases, because typically coding systems such as ICD-10, which are often employed in many health systems, only capture about 5% of rare diseases. So you're omitting 95% of the burden. You're not monitoring it. Could you imagine running a business where you are not monitoring 95% of your entities? And so rare disease coding, and specifically orphan coding and its introduction into health data systems, is critical for the health economic arguments for evaluating your interventions. And so we see, for instance, in the European Union under the RD Code project, the push towards implementing this in more and more data sets across the EU, and certainly in Western Australia, we're partnering with the RD Code project to do exactly the same thing with our health data sets. Again, I'm aware that I'm extremely ignorant and don't want to be insensitive to the opportunities and challenges in India. There are so many things that I have no clue about that I'm sure are amazing opportunities waiting to be unlocked through and for India. Touching again on this both need and opportunity, we've heard mention of
when we're talking about the number and severity of the conditions across the globe, then this really does become a human rights issue and a universal healthcare issue. We can also think about this from a discovery and innovation point of view. There's clarity from the extremity of rare diseases. The conditions are so severe, if you make an intervention and it works, you're able to see that. You'll probably see it very quickly. So there's an enormous benefit from this signal to noise ratio. And we see that in the fact that nearly half of new medicines come from rare disease research. We see it recurrently. We see it in examples like treatments for common hypercholesterolemia that came from dissecting apart rare and lethal forms hypercholesterolemia in children. We see it in digital health with advances in imaging, text mining, and other artificial intelligence applications.
We also see it in the implementation of precision medicine. If we look across the globe at various precision medicine projects, or we look in our own jurisdiction, there are two key driver domains often for implementation of precision medicine, one being rare disease and the other being cancer. So I think cumulatively there's enormous opportunity to address severe unmet need through four pillars of prevention, and I think there are particular special and high impact opportunities for India. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth. Okay, we'll go to the next speaker, Dr. Anurag Agrawal. Let me introduce to him. Dr. Agrawal currently is the director of CSR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, Delhi. He graduated in medicine from AIIMS in 1994, followed by specialization in internal medicine, pulmonary disease, and critical care from Baylor College of Medicine, Houston, and PhD in physiology from Delhi University. His research activities include experimental and computational model systems to study disease, especially asthma. Dr. Agrawal believes health data analytics with artificial intelligence applications to be the new frontier of medicines, and is actively engaged in promoting medicine and informatics confluence. Dr. Agrawal has been recognized internationally, nationally for his contributions to genomics, and was awarded Bhatnagar and National Bioscience Awards and many others. He serves on advisory capacity to many organizations such as Public Health Foundations of India. Now, Dr. Agrawal, stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muthaiya. Let me just share my screen. I hope you can see my slides. And it's wonderful to be following Gareth, because I think his talk sets up beautifully what it means to have rare disease in India. The simplest way I can put it is the title of my slide. We are a country where 1 in 1,000 means a million. And the meaning of the word rare becomes progressively more challenging when you look at these numbers. Okay. So India is a great place to study genetics. At one level, we are amongst the most diverse places on this earth. There is no Indian race. I mean, ethnically, we are a mixture of all kinds of races. But within the sub-communities of India, we are very small endogamous groups. So we are the most and the least diverse at the same time. And many genetic diseases of a very large variety run at a very high prevalence inside these sub-communities because of a close-knit inbred family structure. To illustrate the first point, that India is extremely diverse, I have plotted the Indian various sub-communities on a principal component map where Yoruba African population is to the left, the European Sef is to the top right, and the Chinese Han is the bottom right. And you can see that various sub-communities of India pretty much span everything from Sef to Han. And this became the cover page of a paper from one of our sister laboratories talking about meeting the ancestors, where it shows that India has been one of the critical points where humans come out of Africa, settle down, create civilization, then create multiple movements back and forth. On a different index, there is something called identity by descent. Now let me explain that to you. If parents are related to each other, you will have large segments which are identical on both your father, paternal and maternal chromosomes. Now looking at a distribution, looking at the frequency of long segments of identity on paternal and maternal chromosomes, you can say how inbred populations are. So let me look, if you look at this graph towards the right, at the top where it says YRI and CEF, this is what European or African populations would look like, extremely outbred. You can see where Ashkenazi Jews are marked over here and the Finns are marked over here. And you can see they are only halfway down this graph. As you start coming to the bottom of the graph, these are the Indian populations. In genetics textbooks, we talk about Finns or Ashkenazi Jews as examples of highly inbred populations with a high element of genetic diseases. And yet, you can look from this graph quantitatively that most Indian large subcommunities are 5 to 10 times more inbred than these populations. Then why don't we see much more genetic disease than what we see already? And the most obvious reason is that we don't look for it. In fact, this became one of the cover pages of Nature Genetics some time ago by Dr. Thangraj, one of my colleagues, where he shows that deleterious mutations are actually common all over the world. And you can see them as, people colored half. So they will be recessive. And if you have only one copy, you stay healthy. But in India, there are many communities we can find when we look for them, not without looking for them, where homozygous conditions are very common. And India might be one of the centers of genetic disease in this world. So do we need community-based screening? Jewish communities had faced this problem earlier, and they started programs like Dor Yeshurim, built on the premise that fatal and debilitating genetic disorders have absolutely no reason to be perpetuated. You heard in the previous talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary preventions. And one good example of this particular program, which is basically very prevalent in some communities in Israel, is that Tay-Sachs disease, for which it was started, is now virtually gone. Can we do something like that in India? And how far are we? Here is an example just to illustrate this point. Almost any doctor in South India who takes care of these populations knows that in the Arya-Vaisya population, you cannot give succinylcholine. It's actually pretty uncommon. But we see 1 in 24 people in this community having homozygous silent mutations. Very simple example of classical pharmacogenomics that simply is known to the doctors, but has never really reached the genetics world. In India, a patient with rare disease goes through 8 physician visits, 3 misdiagnoses, and 7+ years to diagnosis. Even if the disease was reversible or controllable, the opportunity is typically lost. So what can we do about it? My institute has 2 major programs. We have one program called Guardian, Genomics for Understanding Rare Diseases, in which we do discovery of the rare disease variants responsible for genetic diseases in India, and we convert them under the second program called GOMED, Genomics and Other Omics Tools for Enabling Medical Decisions, to affordable tests. Basically, Guardian runs on sequencing as one of the primary ways of discovery, and GOMED runs as a simpler, as far as possible, simple nucleic acid diagnostics for translating it and making it available to populations. Both these programs have been running for quite some time now. I'll take only one quick case study to show the capacity of the system. Spinocerebellar ataxia is one of the commonest neurological diseases, many types, some familiar, subtle clinical differences. The Indian spectrum was barely known. As recently back as 10 years ago, samples were typically sent to foreign labs, and new types of SCAs were discovered from Indian patients, actually outside. It took about 20 years. In these 20 years, my parent medical institute, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and my current institute, Institute of Genomics Integrative Biology, worked together to map at-risk populations, find common founder mutations, create genetic testing services, keep adding to comprehensive mutation databases as we discovered them through NGS, particularly novel mutations, and start community intervention programs, and eventually end up with models, immortalized cell lines where R&D could be done. We probably have the largest such repository in the world, which is not a surprise given the population of India. And as I explained to you, the higher frequency of rare genetic diseases. And this, of course, is not an SCA, but we have found communities where, the founder mutation might be found in 10% of the population, not very uncommon for us. We have been able to describe the mutants, create the tests, make them available through Lal Path Labs and other path labs in the country. And very importantly, simultaneously able to bring repository of stem cells of affected patients that can be used to actually look at new drugs coming out. And this was very important when University of Wisconsin, for one of these diseases, was able to come up with a new drug, but they were limited in terms of access to immortalized cells that they could study the efficacy of the drug in. And that was a very nice collaboration that happened. Sometimes it leads us into very interesting directions. This was a 29-year-old businessman from Eastern India with fever and joint pains. Ultimately, on whole exome sequencing, we saw mutations that actually were not common in India, but are common in Persian ancestry. And because we've had long-standing collaborations across the Middle East, we had that in our databases. And when you think about it, Middle East and India has a very long history together. And we were able, again, using this to find smaller communities within India with Persian ancestry from the time of the Mughals, who have mostly stayed within their own community and are a hotspot for many of these diseases. And of course, this is a very obvious thing to those of us who know Indian history, that Arabs and Indians have had a very long contact with each other. And this Al-Mina database that we now manage with them now makes many of these variants available globally. My institute has been very active in trying to understand genetic diversity in Asia. We were, of course, the first in this country to perform whole genome sequencing. Many other countries, their first human genomes and their capacity either was done at IGIB or analyzed by us or in collaboration with us. And you can see the marks all over South Asia. And that's been a very enriching experience for us to both give and take and learn. Like I said, these are our two major programs. One of them is a discovery platform where we ask questions from unknown diseases. Today, we have an ability to solve 30 to 40% of undiagnosed diseases coming to us. And every time we discover one, given our community substructure, the applicability of that mutation to the population tends to be higher. So we are usually able to convert it into a usable population-based test that could be as simple as a PCR. We are currently running this program called IndiGen. Now it's going to be called IndiGen Med, which is genomics for public health in India, in which we start sequencing large fractions of these subcommunities in India. The basic beginning has been made, where the first 1,000 Indians were sequenced, and the whole genomes have been done. And this will be extended to 10,000 people in the next 2 years. And we expect the number to cross 100,000 over the next 5 years. This is being supported as a mission program by the Government of India and Council of Scientific and Industrial Research and Department of Biotechnology, two of its component structures. One of the very important problems we struggle with, for which we are using India's strength in informatics, is we are in an area where a report that you generate is out of date within a week. In fact, it may be out of date by the time the patient receives it. Because so many unknown variants exist. When I spoke about these 1,000 genome variations, we added 12 million previously unknown variants to the global databases. So many of these have unknown functional significance. As you learn more, the interpretation would change. Yet you have to maintain a lot of privacy and ethics. So we have come up with a genome information card containing a code that can be read by an app. The app has a patient interface and a doctor interface. Both people receive very different kind of reports when they scan. The card is linked on the back end to the complete sequencing that has been performed for them, which means every time they scan, the interpretation can be updated. In fact, on our servers, on a test case, we are now repeating these analyses periodically and measuring the degree of change. As in the world of genomics, we learn more and more. This is the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Harshvardhan for India, launching this idea of a genome card, that we plan to make a personal genome card for communities that are heavily afflicted to start with, and then extending to the rest of India. I will not speak much about this, but we have been doing significant work on new generations of CRISPRs, capable of very, very precise, very specific therapeutic genome editing. These are far better than the versions currently available in the world. These are being done with Japan. One of them shows about 90% lower off target than current CRISPR trials that are ongoing. That we have already done for sickle cell disease now, and it's gone to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles for humanized mouse work with stem cell corrections. Many other things that we can talk about on a different day. One very important thing we realize is that we need to increase the awareness for genomics amongst medical professionals. We've been helped by global giants, including Sanofi, in taking these things forward. And every year we try to train more doctors. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agrawal. It's very enlightening and interesting and exciting for me. I have to ask or request Dr. Ramappa and Mr. Bhawan, just excuse me for making these changes. Dr. Keck has to leave early. If you don't mind, I will request him to take your place. Is that okay? Dr. Levin, can you hear me?
Yes, that's.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Craig, it's your choice, your chance now. Let me introduce you to the audience. Can you go, Sam?
Yeah, I'm making him the co-host.
Yes, thank you.
It's done.
Okay, thank you. Here is a small introduction about Dr. Craig. Dr. Rudiger Craig is the Director, Department of Health Promotion at the World Health Organization in Geneva since September 2019. Here he heads the WHO's work on risk factors such as tobacco consumption and harmful alcohol use. In addition to the normative work, his team supports member states in public health legislation and ways to impose additional taxes on unhealthy products. Before this, Dr. Craig was the Director of Universal Health Coverage and played a key role in placing this issue on the global health agenda. From 2009 to 14, Dr. Craig was the Director of Social Determinants of Health and Equity and was responsible for organizing the World Conference in this topic. Before joining WHO, Dr. Craig worked at the Genome Agency of International Corporation, where he developed and implemented the social protection agenda for Germany's development cooperation, and later implemented a WHO regional office for Europe in Copenhagen, where he was head of the unit of healthy aging. Dr. Craig studied the educational science and human medicine and was one of the first public health graduate of Germany University and holds PhD from the University of Bielefeld. Dr. Craig is married and he has 3 adult daughters. I welcome Dr. Craig.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, dear Professor Mutiana, colleagues, and thank you also for your flexibility. Let me first of all congratulate India for doubling the healthcare budget and include health promotion, disease prevention, and hygienic measures into the portfolio. This is the right step and a bold decision. We know from other crises that by investing in health, this will also yield economic and social effects that your country will benefit from in regaining economic speed. Honestly, I could never believe that India would not see the benefits and listen to those who regard health as a cost and not as an investment. The COVID-19 pandemic brings many of the social shortcomings to the fore. And one of them is that many states were not prepared because their health systems were too weak. As a result, the world is now paying trillions of US dollars and faced the worst recession ever since World War II. We should now learn from this crisis and build resilient health systems which are properly financed and where people receive the care they need without facing financial hardship. With this recent decision, India is on the same path as Canada or Finland, who have seen the positive outcomes for their overall development. Of course, your GDP health spending, even with this doubling, is still too low, and I'm sure you know that, of course. But you are an incredible nation and with incredible potential. You are incredible India. You have shown again and again that you are able to deal with crises, that you address challenges. One of these challenges unfold when dealing with people with rare diseases. The vision of the Sustainable Development Goals is a world in which no one is left behind, including people who suffer from rare diseases. Just because a disease affects a small number of people does not make it irrelevant or less important than diseases that affect millions. This is a quote that shall be the basis of my speech today. It comes from WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros. With 300 to 350 million people affected worldwide and more than 7,000 different types of diseases known to date, rare diseases represent a major challenge in public health that has been largely ignored. Consequently, this is a field in public health and research that would certainly benefit from globally concerted action and international collaboration. Why, we may ask, are rare diseases a matter to be discussed at governmental level, at prime minister's level, and not only within ministries of health? Why are the solutions only possible if we act in solidarity across national borders? Viewing rare diseases through a global public health lens offers some perspectives. Rare diseases patients and their families are a particularly vulnerable group of citizens who experience scarcity of medical knowledge, difficulties in accessing adequate care, as well as isolation from society due to the rarity of their condition and the scattered expertise. In general, health systems are not adapted to rare diseases, and there is little public health policy to respond to their specific needs. Access to quality health care, overall societal and medical support, effective liaison between hospitals and general practices, as well as professional and social integration, autonomy, and independence. Universal health coverage means that all people and communities receive the promotive, preventive, curative, rehabilitative, and palliative health services they need of sufficient quality to be effective, while also ensuring that the use of these services does not expose the user to financial hardship. Health systems can learn a lot from rare diseases to design systems that are fit for the future and effectively contributing to universal health coverage. Rarity calls for increased international mobility of experts, as well as of patients, as the most clinically relevant expertise will most likely not be available locally. Will innovative solutions in E and M health be able to pool expertise and develop virtual centers of expertise? Could they help to create expert structures for the management and care of rare disease patients and bring together multidisciplinary competencies and skills to serve the specific medical, rehabilitative, and palliative needs of rare diseases patients? Could accredited global centers of excellence help to provide best quality of care based on available clinical evidence? Would we be able to globally find innovative ways of financing such centers so that patients and their families will not fall into poverty because out-of-pocket payments related to the care of the rare disease? Pooling seems to be one of the magic words when it comes to rare diseases. It helps to bring together the critical mass and balance, low prevalence and incidence. It helps to focus the diffuse shadow light in which rare diseases are currently barely seen and create spotlights. Pooling of research and development, pooling of data, pooling of care facilities, and pooling of experts. Lots of excellent work has been undertaken in recent years in this regard. The launching of the European reference networks is one of such initiatives. Could pooling also serve to bring in expertise from you here in India, from people in Japan, Australia, Canada, or China? A second word that comes to mind is collaboration. Sheen Atkins and colleagues, when reviewing the recent Charcot-Marie Tooth research, suggested that it is unlikely that we are going to see a dramatic change unless there is a wholesale shift in the process of drug discovery and development, combined with increased collaboration between academics, industry, government labs, and research foundations in the rare disease arena. How will such a shift be concretely orchestrated? What incentives could be created that instigate such change? One such incentive could be to collaborate, to agree on thresholds for safe and clinically effective standards for diagnosis, care, and treatment, and to collect international best practice. And a third word might be smart innovation. As technologies are advancing, we are confident that we will see routine in vivo gene editing in a medium time horizon. I added smart to innovation as, again, the global community can and certainly will learn from rare diseases. We are faced with the option of editing the human genome with ease and precision. Notwithstanding the potential of these applications to be beneficial to any one individual, unforeseen risks such as epigenic and intergenerational effects cannot be ruled out. Besides principled reasons, it is also because of these uncertainties that interventions seeking to modify the human genome are banned in many countries. On the other hand, the question posed by the US National Academy of Sciences and National Academy of Medicine is no longer whether or not the human genome ought to be edited. Rather, the question is what should be the criteria for heritable germline editing, and what principles should guide the governance of human genome editing. Such a shift in the approach to germline editing would probably have global consequences for individuals, societies, and mankind altogether. So, on the way towards cure of some rare diseases, I humbly suggest going this path with caution. Colleagues, I'm sure that pooling, cooperation, and smart innovation will help to increase the attention to rare diseases globally. India has a lot to contribute and learn from this global endeavor. WHO is looking forward to being at your side, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Craig, for your wonderful message to us and for all Indian people, not just only here. Thank you very much for taking time and addressing us. We hope to see you again in the near future in our events or in some other events in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It has really been my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Okay, we next move on to Mr. Lewis Bowen. Okay, can you? Lewin Bowen is currently serving as the director of Child Help International, a charity dedicated to supporting children with spina bifida hydrocephalus in developing countries. Until June 2020, he was also International Federation President for Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus. He holds board membership in Urardis, Solidargo, and Agriculture NGO, and National Child Help Organization in Belgium, France, Germany, and Netherlands. In those capacities, he is a global advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities with engaging activity in primary prevention of these impairments. Lewin has background in architecture and business administration and got involved in the International Federation as the brother of young men with spina bifida hydrocephalus. I was fortunate enough to listen to Lewin on many, many occasions in the last 5-6 years. He is very passionate about the cause and excellent person, excellent human. And thank you. I thank Lewin for taking time to become part of this webinar. Lewin, it's yours.
Thank you for the very kind introduction and for the invitation to speak on the situation of children with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. Am I allowed to make a small presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, please.
You can share the screen. You are the co-host now.
I am co-host.
Yeah.
The thing is, I'm always a bit
you can share the screen.
Reluctant to use the technology, because then I'm okay. Where are you?
It's perfect. It's good.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So now you should see. Let me see what happens if I push this button. Present. Is this working okay?
Yes.
Yep.
It's working good now.
Working good. So thank you for the introduction. And I work for an NGO, Child Help International, that is trying to support children with spina bifida and hydrocephalus in developing countries. Okay, how do I move my slides? Okay, so just a small explanation on what spina bifida is. It's a neural tube defect. It's a defect that happens very early in the pregnancy, in the first 21 days, when a neural plate folds into the neural tube, and if something goes wrong, then you have a neural tube defect. And so it's like a zipper. If the zipper doesn't close correctly, there is a problem. That's a neural tube defect. And you have many forms. The one that is most commonly used or known is spina bifida. It's the open neural tube defect on the back. There are many other forms. We won't go into detail, but they all have in common that they're preventable. Now, I had a discussion with an epidemiologist last week, actually. I used the word incidence of spina bifida, and the epidemiologist uses the word prevalence of spina bifida or neural tube defects, because prevalence is the situation in the society, and the incidence is how many cases there are in the society. And it's unknown how many cases there are. in prevalence, spina bifida or neural tube defects are a rare disease, but in incidence, they are definitely not. And I'll explain that later. Hydrocephalus is a different disability. It's associated with spina bifida, but it can be compared to this faucet that's not working very well. So in the brain, you produce cerebral spinal fluid. If the circulation and absorption is disturbed, then you have hydrocephalus. You will know this because in India specifically, there's been this very widely shared story of baby Runa, who had a very severe case of hydrocephalus. And the causes of hydrocephalus are very different. It could be cancer, could be hemorrhage. Could be a congenital blockage of one of the pathways of the cerebral spinal fluid, or could be spina bifida, which is a malformation that also affects the brain. So there are many causes. Our estimates is actually that there are about a million children every year that will be born with or acquire spina bifida and or hydrocephalus. Every year, every single year, 1 million children are born globally. Of that 1 million, an estimate of about 100,000 are born in India. So preventing this will, make a really big impact in the global, let's say, amount of suffering that can be seen. In India, this means that about 100,000 families at some point are confronted with a preventable disability. Now, the situation, as I said before, it's really it's not very well documented, but you can see the regions on the world map where the problem is biggest. It's primarily connected to the socioeconomic status of the people. So it's very logical because it's closely linked to a nutritional deficit in the case of spina bifida and to hygiene in the case of hydrocephalus. So in the places where where nutrition is the hardest, where access to good hygiene is lowest, that's where you get the highest incidences of these disabilities. And that's where we also can make the biggest difference. This is how spina bifida and hydrocephalus will be presented in your journals and medical papers, either as horror pictures or, little criminals with the bars, or as kind of neutral drawings. I was an advocate, as Ramaya kindly introduced me. Advocates see a problem a little bit different. They will see it as children. This is my brother, by the way, on the right-hand side. I forgot her name. I forgot the name of this cute girl. These are also people with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and that's how you should see them as well, in a way. They are people active in society with a problem, we agree, and a problem that can be costly, but there are still people who are family members who are, living their life like everybody, or trying to live their life like anybody else. And I think that goes for everybody with a rare disease. They are a person that has a specific need where we should find an answer to. Anyway, I always compare spina bifida to this rose bush in front of a vineyard. This is a picture I cannot use in France because they all know about this, but in India, maybe this works. In France, what is the name? The people who grow grow grapes to make wine. They put roses in front of the vines because the roses will indicate sooner that there is a problem in the vineyard, and so the farmer can then take preventative action. So if the roses get sick, the roses will get sick sooner than the vines, and they can protect the whole vineyard. In a way, spina bifida is similar. If you monitor spina bifida closely, you will see the trends in spina bifida will indicate whether there's a problem. It could be clustered. If there is a cluster of spina bifida, there's a problem in that specific population. It's, data are in that sense very important. It's not only about getting an insight in your population's health as a public health type of measure, it's also a rights issue. many children born with a disability, and specifically if it's a structural disability that is easy to diagnose, will be hidden or will be, not receive any care, would not show up in any statistics. Whereas in a way, every child born in a population has certain rights because they're born in that population and they're holder of certain rights. And this right is enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 18, where it says that children with disabilities shall be registered, because with that registration comes certain rights, such as right to access to healthcare, etc., whatever is in that country, in that location. So it's not only a public health issue, it's also a rights issue to address this diagnosis or a registration. And so in 2010, the WHO actually voted on a birth defects resolution that lays out very well where they try to assist member states to strengthen surveillance system, prevent birth defects, implement screening programs, and provides support and care to children with birth defects and their families. Now, when this resolution was voted in 2010, it was actually the Sierra office, the Southeast Asia Regional Office of WHO, who took this on as one of their priorities. And they led all kinds of registration office. They developed a database for this program. They developed toolkits, etc. And they realized, they started off with trying to diagnose the 10 most common birth defects, but they ended up just including all birth defects as far as they could diagnose them. And as we've learned from other speakers, there is a significant amount of sophistication to diagnose more and more and better even these rare diseases. And this can all be accommodated with the systems that WHO Sierra pioneered. For spina bifida and hydrocephalus, this is particularly important because now they linked a biomarker, the biomarker being red blood cell folate, with the incidence of neural tube defects. As you can see, it's an exponential issue. The graver the insufficiency of folate in the blood, the higher the incidence. Now, you can also see that this graph starts at 200 nanomole per liter blood here. That's where it starts. Folate deficiency, which is also diagnosed as a separate disease, starts at 100. So if we would take this graph, you can see that at 100 nanomoles at folate deficiency, you can see that the incidence of spina bifida will be very high and much higher than the rare disease levels. So the issue is to try to get folate levels at sufficient level within the population. And deficiency, just to give you an example, in Ethiopia, research was done on folate levels in population. One third of the women of childbearing age had a folate deficiency. So not just insufficiency, which would be here, but deficiency. So you can assume that this is a big problem in the country. Okay. And I was also glad to hear Gareth mention the prevention of neural tube defects in his presentation. As you can see, once you try to get folate levels up in a population, the incidence or prevalence of neural tube defects goes down significantly. And it goes from a high incidence to a low incidence, from a lower incidence to an even lower incidence. So if the population has a good nutritional status, it will still decrease. If it has a worse nutritional status, it will decrease very significantly. And this has been documented over and over and over again. Now in India, the Indian government, both in specific states and nationally, wanted to take some action on the prevention of neural tube defects because it is a significant public health issue. And they made the levels of folate in mandated, and this is by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, so low that it will have no public health impact. So I think the Spina Bifida Foundation of India will be very thankful of your support in raising this issue, so that, you know, prevention of neural tube defects, which is low-hanging fruit in the case of prevention of rare diseases, to take action in your country. As I said, in Ethiopia, we've documented with the help of Mekelle University the relationship again between the RBC folate levels and the prevalence of neural tube defects in birds in that region. I won't explain it too much, but it is very well documented, a very well documented situation. Now, why is prevention important? I think it's been mentioned many times, both on the general or the specific level, is that if you're born with the spina bifida or with a rare disease, the following care is necessary, and it's a lot. It places a high burden on the health system. So preventing is better than cure, and to put less stress on the health system, it's better not to be born with the birth defects. So thank you for the opportunity of explaining the situation of spina bifida and hydrocephalus specifically. I hope it was informative and that it illustrated the general points Dr. Craig was making. And here's my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leuven. I really appreciate your presentation as always. Thank you for taking time in your busy schedule. We really appreciate it, and we hope the Spina Bifida Association in India would be more active in getting things done as you wish. And I hope you will come back another time and give more on this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker, Dr. Murali Ramappa. Muralidhar Ramappa currently serves as a pediatric cornea and anterior segment services consultant at LV Prasad Eye Institute. Muralidhar holds masters in ophthalmology and from Bangalore and Medical College, then fellowship in cornea and anterior segment at LVPAI, and completed extensive training in pediatric ophthalmology, advanced refractive surgery, and lamellar corneal surgery with the particular focus on genetics. All are from prestigious universities in USA. Dr. Muralidhar was bestowed with several awards. Most notably, one is from the American Academy of Ophthalmology. He is known for his videos on various lamellar surgeries in children and were exclusively screened in the Learning Lounge. I am particularly pleased to mention that IORD associated with Dr. Murali setting up the Center for Excellence for Rare Eye Diseases at LV Prasad Eye Institute, Hyderabad, early this year. This center perhaps is the first of its kind in the country. Dr. Muralidhar areas of interest include the treatment of visual impairment and blindness in children, with particular focus to development abnormalities and rare eye diseases. Dr. Murali, there.
Under what name you are there, Dr. Murali? I'd like to make you the co-host. Please unmute, sir.
Can't see him.
Dr. Ramaya?
Yes, I'm looking for him. I can't see him.
What name doctor is there? I tried Ramappa, Murali, both not getting it.
I have to assume if he's not there.
Ramappa, please unmute and say something, sir.
No, it's not. His name is not in here.
No, if he's here, he would be responding by now.
Right. Well,
Dr. Murali?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sorry things didn't work out for him, or I don't know what happened. Now I request Mr. Sikriji to give vote of thanks and concluding remarks on this webinar.
Thank you, Professor Ramaiah. A very exhaustive and vivid deliberations, very dynamic panelists you have really selected. And the people who are from industry participating today, they must know that IURD is totally volunteering organization, which is headed by Professor Ramaiah, whose heart throbs only for the rare disease patient. A man who really dedicatedly work for the social cause only. His mission is to help the rare disease patient, and the patient should become a normal person. That is his real mission and vision. Such a dynamic panel, they have really given exhaustive information with their technical experience, regulatory experience, and innovation and R&D experience. So although IURD Managing Committee consists of many, many volunteers, but most of them believe not to mention their name. They are the silent worker. They do not believe in publicity. But I would like to speak at least Dr. Krishnaji Rao and Praveer Sikdar name for looking after the logistics of this webinar to make it a grand success. I'll be failing in my duty if I do not name Rotary International District 3150 Hyderabad and District Governor Mr. Hanwant Reddy for his unflinching support for many years towards the noble cause. There is an indirect support from the pharma industry also. There are 5 associations, directly or indirectly, they have been associated with IURD since last couple of months. BDMA is the primary. Mr. Agarwal is my friend Agarwal is already there. IPA, that is Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance. IDMA, Indian Drug Manufacturer Association. FOOP, which I had as a chairman, and many more bodies who have been conducting many webinars and seminars from time to time to help IURD in achieving the goal and objective of the humanity. The mission of IURD is to be a strong common voice for rare disease patients and their facilities around the world. I wish Department of Pharma and regulators, with the support of Government of India, come forward with a collaborative proposal to have a tie-up with patient of rare disease, and IURD comes as a linkage between government and the patient. The encouraging words expressed by Madam S. Aparna, I mean, it was really unbelievable that government is really very serious now, particularly now. I'm not talking about the past. And I am fully confident the results are going to be phenomenal very soon. I am grateful to Dr. Kretsch of WHO, Dr. Bayman of Health Department from Australia, and Mr. Bohaven from Belgium. My thanks to Dr. Muralidhar of Center of Excellence for Rare Eye Disease. And I'll be failing if I do not talk about Mr. Anurag Agarwal, Director CSIR. So my special thanks to each and every participant, delegates, organizers, Government of India, specifically my gratitude to Madam Aparna. I know after the budget, so much of schedule, even now I'm finding her name is there on the screen. It means she is participating. So last almost 2 hours she has spent with us. So that shows the seriousness on the part of the government. That shows the seriousness on the part of Professor Ramaiah. And all of us, whether from industry or any other association, have the duty to perform as a patriotic citizen of this great country. With these remarks, I again say thank you. Again, grateful to everybody. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you. This concludes this webinar. Thank you for everybody participation. Sikriji, thank you. Shyamji, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Ramaiah, great meeting.
Bye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.